we've been conditioned to believe is that men are supposed to help protect us. And I was like, I think that that's where we've gone wrong, because if we look at really the dynamics between masculinity and femininity, the masculine should be the protecting and like allowing women just to be open to receiving. Hey, Kate, thanks for coming on the episode and podcast today. I am so excited to have you here and to be able to dive in with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
I know. It has been so fun. I will say in the last, I don't know, has it been like 5 months, 4 months, like since you joined into the Flow Collective and then like came to the retreat, and just to be able to get to know you on like such a deeper level. I think the retreat definitely helps with that for sure, like getting to know people on such a deeper level. But it has been such an honor to have you a part of our community and in our network. So I am beyond excited to have you here on the podcast now.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really excited to get to go to the retreat, and I've got my cozy
Ooh,
robe.
your robe.
Yes, keeping me company, and it's been mutually enjoyable.
That's
I feel like
awesome.
I found my place. So thank you.
Yeah. The robe, I was like, I want something. Like I kept seeing this idea of like all of us hanging out in like pajamas was kind of this essence, like feeling that I wanted to create. And I was like, what if I buy everybody like those, almost like bridesmaid type style silky pajamas? But I was like, then I have to know like everybody's really intimate sizes, and I don't want to mess things up, make it uncomfortable or any of that kind of stuff. But I was like, what's a little bit more general, like has a little bit more room in its sizing? And I was like, a robe, like robes sound so amazing. And it was so fun to have everybody like lounging around in robes and then doing the chicken banana song and stuff like that. And the robes was fun. Well, okay, like I know today we're going to talk so much and we're going to dive into a lot of really cool things, but tell us a little bit about you and like what was it that brought you to the Flow Collective? What made you jump into the retreat? Like tell us a little bit about the Kate of you a couple months ago and kind of what had you jump in with us?
Yeah, so I am a women's holistic hormone health practitioner. I live in Texas. I've got 3 little kids, and I have been doing business for how long? Like 18 months, basically, since my youngest was born. And over that time, like last year, I started kind of realizing like I need more help. I need more help in like knowing how to run a business, knowing how to get new clients that are beyond just like my intimate group of friends or Facebook friends. And so I've hired a few different coaches, and towards the end of last year, was part of like a women's this group. And I gained a lot from that group. Like there were a lot of great things that I learned, and they were high yield months. But then like at the end of the year, I saw your ad for your book and cycle syncing. Like as a holistic hormone practitioner, like I've been cycle syncing my life for 5 years, but even like through pregnancy and everything, but like hadn't really nailed down like how does that work in terms of running my business. And so seeing that, I was just like, it was an easy, like I bought it on Kindle and read it over the Christmas break while I was trying to kind of like decompress, and it was just like resonated so much. And throughout the book, like just little moments I kept like pulling up your website, like what does it look like to work with her, like how do I kind of get more of her mentorship. And then we ended up talking, I saw the Flow Collective, and it just felt like the right place, because by the end of that time, like I got my period back, but I was like, my hormones don't feel right. Like this is my job to help other women, but like I was stressed out and I was burning out. Like I was working really hard. Like I said, like it did have a yield. I did make a bunch of money at the end of the year during that program, but like it wasn't worth it, because I was just like, I'm fried, and I'm frazzled, and my ovulation is delayed and all of this stuff. So it was time for a change, and I decided to jump in. And then knowing that you had a retreat, I was like, that's exactly the kind of thing that I am looking for. So I just had to make it work, with someone come watch my kids, but so worth it. And like, so it's been about a month since then.
Yeah.
So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah. Well, and I think I mean, like, even just a couple of things on there. I think the thing that came up for me too is just like giving yourself grace. Sometimes I think as entrepreneurs, we get really down on ourselves. Like, I know for sure when I used to work in the area of decluttering, I would feel so guilty and so ashamed when my house would be a mess. I'd be like, how can I actually be teaching other women how to do this when I can't get it together myself? Or
Right.
how do I do that? Even now, sometimes now I'm like really open and honest. Like, not everything in my life matches up with my cycle. Like, that's not, I don't expect it to ever get to that place where everything
Yeah.
is matching up. But I think we sometimes do hold that standard that whatever it is that we're serving with or whatever we're doing, like, we have to be this expert in it and we cannot fail at any point in time. And the reality is that most of us are serving and providing support for people in areas that were struggles for us. And I think that that's even the other day, I can't remember where I was, but somebody said something and I was like, oh, well, you become most knowledgeable in the areas that you teach. Like, right. Like the
Yeah.
places I think that you want to grow and learn the most are the places that you go to teach on. And so I think it's inherent to kind of expect that there are going to be seasons where we maybe do struggle still with that. And we are still learning with that. And I think one that helps us become better teachers and like help support our students and clients and whoever they are better. But I think it also is just like that reality of like, this is how it's going to be. Like, it is going to be these ebbs and flows. And for you, there was a season of recognizing like, hey, I am supporting people with their hormones. And I know right now my hormones are way off. So like, what needs to shift and what needs to change?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I had to listen to my own advice, which is like what
Mhm.
I tell women all day is like, you need to slow down. You
Yeah.
just slow the F down.
Yeah.
And so I could tell that the the energy of your program, the Flow Collective was going to be conducive to that. Like I told you, I was like, I feel like I'm able to integrate like the things that I learned from the book on my own,
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
don't feel like I need a ton of support in that area because that's one of my strengths too. Is I
Yeah.
read a book and it's like, I know it.
Yeah.
I already like automatically filter like what my clients need to hear, what I need to hear. And it's just like in my brain. And so I was
Mhm.
like, I don't need like the course necessarily, but like I need that
Mhm.
community. That's what I'm looking for is a community that's really not hustling, not saying like,
Mhm.
oh, we're doing it the feminine way of business, but actually it's like grind, grind, grind.
Yeah.
And in like reality of slowing down. And like that's what the retreat also was like all about, that receiving energy that like I have been talking about so much lately and just need to like
Mhm.
draw into my life as much as possible. And like I'm on my period today, like today's cycle day 1. And I'm like, I wasn't experiencing a lot of pain in other cycles too, but I just like, I knew it was coming. Like I just felt that energetically and painless, symptomless, like
Yeah.
it's just comfortable. Like I'm just happy to be just chilling in my bright red sweatsuit and my robe and drinking tea and
Mhm.
get to talk to you today.
Yeah. So good. Yeah. And I know that is, I like that receiving energy is one that you have definitely grasped onto. Like, that was definitely one of the biggest. I've seen you even just talking about it so much on social media now, too. And I think it's one that a lot of women have a really hard time with, even though we would say we don't, right? I think
Yeah.
for me, what I've recognized is just historically, like, women had to fight for rights. We had to fight for equality. We had to fight for a lot of these things. And we had to almost prove ourselves as being worthy. We had to prove ourselves as being equal. We had to prove, like, there's just been historically so much proving energy and so much fighting energy in women's lineage. It's not necessarily even just our own generation, but like the lineage of women, when we really look at like women actually receiving rights and education and all those types of
Yeah.
things, it's really not that far off, you guys. I feel like it's been so long ago, but it really hasn't. Like, we really only have really started researching women's health in like the last decade or two. It's really not been that long. And so when we look at that, I think really stepping into that like willingness to be open and receive and support, like, even I've had a few posts go viral most recently. One of them yesterday was this comment around, I like posted something about like the patriarchy. And one of them said, one of the lies that she believes, like we've been conditioned to believe, is that men are supposed to help protect us, and, or that men were safe, or that like men are safe for women to help protect us or something of that nature. And I was like, I think that that's where we've gone wrong, because if we look at really the dynamics between masculinity and femininity, the masculine should be the protecting and like allowing women just to be open to receiving. And our society has gotten it all wrong. Like we've muddled it up enough that that's not what's happening. And so it's no wonder that so many women are like in this sort of unhealthy stepping into our masculine, because we've had to, in a sense, like we haven't been able to really step into that receiving energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're talking about like we have to fight for our rights and all of these
Mm-hmm.
things, like very active, kind of masculine, but also I think even before that, like the patriarchal woman is all about giving and serving. And not that those are bad things, but it's
Mm-hmm.
sort of just a one way, like
Yeah.
in terms of service in the home, sexually, like it's not about the woman receiving. It's
Yeah.
about like being an instrument to serve
Yeah.
others around you. And I think that's another, I think that goes even farther back of
Yeah.
like why we're just not accustomed to being taken care of in the ways that we need to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I talk a lot
Yeah.
about how it's like you can still be someone who serves others, who takes care of others, who is nurturing and all of these things. It's not bad to be those things, but
Mm-hmm.
instead of serving out of a dry cup, you know, but
Mm-hmm.
more having like a totally full overflowing cup that
Yeah.
naturally you have this abundance that like pours out onto everybody around you
Totally.
and that you have to receive instead of put your hand over that cup.
Totally. And I think that that kind of goes into, I mean, probably some of the conversations we've had now, like politically, just like the state of the country and like this transition of a lot of women wanting to go back to being like a trad wife, like kind of type of mentality is like, there is an essence of it that is totally healthy, but a lot of the way it's being interpreted and done is not completely healthy. Like there's this balance of like allowing women to be in that and do that if that is what they really want, and that's where they're feeling the most alive and they feel like they're serving the best. But I think we can get into some really gray lines, and I think I know you and I have both had similar experiences in the sense of like our background of growing up in different religions and different churches, but still I look back at my history and like the ways of which the beliefs and things that I was grown up with. And even now I look back and I'm like, I'm still grateful for all of it. But I definitely now have this sense of, wow, that belief and that way of being led me into almost this like sense of being controlled in a lot of ways. And the last couple of years, I've really challenged a lot of the beliefs and the structures and the paradigms in how I was grown up. And when I see it now, like on social media or I see posts, I'm like, but is that really the way I choose to believe now? And like, is that really how I want to be now? And I think when we look at this dynamic of masculinity and femininity and receiving and the roles in which we play, I think religion has a huge impact on that. And so I would love like to hear a little bit of your story and like what that experience has been like for you as you've now navigated away from the church and now stepping into this place of like really leaning into what does it look like to receive as a woman in a bit different way. So I just opened up a big question.
Yeah.
I'll let it land wherever you want to go with that.
Yeah. So I was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or Mormons. That's the same thing if you don't know. So I was raised Mormon. I was in a very like devout, Orthodox type of family, and I was completely all in. And in my early 20s, I even served a proselyting mission for 18 months. The number one goal from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. was to convert other people, so very much in every way up
Yeah.
until kind of like 2020, basically. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that was a big awakening moment for a lot of people. But unofficially stepped away from the church like a couple years ago. And so, yeah, I mean, it has a lot of similar undertones of evangelical Christianity with its own flair we don't need to get into. But part of that also is being raised with, like, there's a lot of emphasis on like having like personal revelation and inspiration from God.
Mm-hmm.
But also there are leaders of the church, there's a prophet of the church, and they are like still supposed to be like the ultimate, like where everything's filtered through. Like
Mm-hmm.
God talks to them and then they tell us like what, what God wants you to do or believe or think. And so those two things actually kind of like at times for a lot of people start to like not match up.
Mm-hmm.
And the messaging and over the past like 5 years has been increasingly like, if you get personal revelation that's different from what we say, then it's not really from God. And my journey being like around 2020, kind of awakening to the divine feminine,
Mm-hmm.
where I was always, taught like Heavenly Father and Jesus, like we have these masculine deity. And without going too into that, but like I just was like, I felt this like divine feminine presence in my life. And it was like very strong. And it was around the time like there was lockdown. And so we weren't going to church. And so my spirituality became more like home based and my own study. And I started seeking out these things and just kind of awakening to this idea of a mother God.
Mm-hmm.
And that became very powerful to me. Like I felt that deep in my bones that like God was also feminine and that my femininity was divine,
Yeah.
and that like being in a patriarchal church where like only men are leaders, and even in the home like the man holds the authority. And my marriage wasn't really like, I'm a millennial, like I think my marriage wasn't like that, or is like my husband has authority over me. But like in a sense, like because of the church, like it still was that way, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how the church saw it. And so, anyway, kind of going on this journey. And then a lot of women were going on that journey in my church at the same time. And so these women were being more vocal about like, I'm receiving like personal revelation that like God is also feminine, and it's trickling up to the leaders of the church. And they're saying like, they're not saying it's complicated because of the theology. Like basically like, yes, like femininity is divine, but it's still below the masculine
Mm-hmm.
divine. And so eventually you just go like, you can't tell me I'm wrong. Like
Yeah.
I feel this in my bones. And the fact that you say you speak for God, but like I'm talking to God. And so like this isn't matching up,
Yeah.
And then you start seeing the cracks and other things that are no longer in alignment and that you no longer believe or no longer want to have taught to your children.
Mm-hmm.
And you become your own authority,
Mm-hmm.
which is terrifying because it's so comforting, that false sense of certainty. Like I
Mm-hmm.
point that out. It's a false certainty because certainty is not possible
Yeah.
in this life for
Yeah.
anything, but it feels safe when you feel certain that
Yeah.
like something is true and something is somebody else knows better,
Yeah.
and like it's easy to fall into that with basically anything, like even
Yeah.
hiring a coach, like where
Totally.
you're like, oh, like this person is going to lead me. They're going to tell me the exact right funnel. They're going to tell me how to align my business to have this perfect success,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. When we stop listening to ourselves, it can feel, we kind of fall into that like childish state
Mm-hmm.
of like, yeah, I want to be parented. I want to be like just watched over and taken care of. And then you
Mm-hmm.
grow up and you say like, I actually have to make my own decisions and listen to my own
Mm-hmm.
knowing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many things in this that I'm like, oh, where do we even go now? Because 100%. I think that there's so much in this sense of like taking personal responsibility and the safety of like having somebody else kind of making those decisions. And that I think even for me, that messaging and belief of like, oh, it's if it happens, it's just God's will, like even those types of things, like for me personally, like growing up was like giving away a lot of my power. And I do today 100% believe that I only have a finite view of what's happening. And there are going to be things that are divinely brought into my path that may not be what I was intending or what I wanted, but are the things that are the best right fit for me because of this bigger picture that I just can't see. So I 100% believe that. But I think for me, it was like a giving away of my power of like, I have no control over my life and my circumstances. It's all just up to God. And I'm just here kind of being the recipient of whatever is being ordained to me, kind of an idea. And so like there's one piece of that, but I would love we could talk on. But the conversation that you talked about where I was like, "Ooh, this is so good. I don't think I've ever really thought about it this way." Is almost in that sense of like this morning I was listening to a podcast that was talking about like our parts and the unhealed parts of us. And that when we as parents are parenting our children, we have to basically parent ourselves first. Like we have to heal those parts of us that were the wounded 6-year-old or the wounded 5-year-old or whatever they are. Those are the parts of us that are oftentimes getting triggered and responding when we're parenting. And until those parts of us are healed and feel like they got the safety and the security from the parents and the love, like even the best of childhoods, right? Like we're all going to have those parts that we're parenting from that place. So as you were saying that, I was like, oh, wow. Like it's almost like the unhealed parts of us are looking to the church or looking to other authority figures to be that healing for us instead of actually creating the true healing that we need. And then having that authority or that self-responsibility of being able to make those decisions. It's like it's easier for us just to deflect that responsibility onto somebody else because those parts of us are still craving and seeking that parent figure, that
Leadership.
person, yeah, that love, that nurturing, that leadership, or something that maybe we didn't get or that we didn't have to the fullest extent, or maybe there's just still a part of us there. Like, I don't know, but that concept, that idea of the parts work and integrating it into, like what you said, is like looking as adults, we're still looking to be parented in a sense. And it's not the adult part of us, it's the child unhealed part of us that is looking for that parent figure, that parental support.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely found a lot of, so like part of my like leaving the church, like it was kind of like everything had to die, like
Yeah.
spiritually for me, because it's just like, I can't like untangle this ball of yarn. Like I
Yeah.
just have to kind of light it on fire and then like
Yeah.
see what comes up later. And but like in all of that, like reading the book No Bad Parts, which is like
Mm-hmm.
basically it's a great book. I recommend understanding that parts work and everything. He talks about like that highest self of us that has to do that leadership and inner parenting. He talks about it. Maybe he doesn't talk about it, but what I got about it, what
Yeah.
I
Your
got from it was that
interpretation.
like
Yeah.
Christ energy, which like I always like had connected to, of like Christ like comes and like meets me in my pain and like heals it and softens it and listens and leads me in like goodness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, so whether you still believe in that Christ energy or not, like I found a helpful spiritual framework in that way, because I do still believe in divinity and in my own divinity, like whatever that means. And that like when we reparent ourselves, we have the tools to do that.
Hmm.
Like we do have this part of ourselves that many of us never access because we're always looking outside of ourselves,
Totally.
even to like a therapist. Like
Yeah.
there's place and time for therapy. Like absolutely. I think therapists are amazing. But sometimes we can even get in that space of like, my therapist is going to heal me,
Mm-hmm.
when like in reality, like what we need in order to heal ourselves like is inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we can be led and guided in how to reconnect and like have that one part of us, like that highest capital self,
Yeah.
meet the wounded parts of us that are still like, there are still parts of me like in my early 20s, like I talk about me as when I was a missionary, like that part of me like still grieves all the time, and I have to go to her and like hug her and hold her because she was so certain and so devoted.
Yeah.
And I love her. Like I see her goodness, all of
Yeah.
these parts of me that did everything that I did and taught everything that I taught out of like pure love, and like belief that like this is what God wanted. And then I have to like tell her like it's okay, like, we're still good,
Yeah.
and that like this life can be so much more free and fulfilling because we're actually following our own, heart and desires. And something that's been hard to unprogram is just the kind of back to the trad wife thing of like, yeah, that was set up for me as like, this is your ultimate highest calling, is to stay home with your kids and just raise them and have that be the main thing for you. And like, I find a lot of joy in that. Like, I partially homeschool my kids. I like having them home with me. I adore my children. And I have this like burning desire to like lift other women, right? And to have this business. And I look back and I'm like, I've started all these like tiny little businesses. Like, I've always wanted to work, but
Yeah.
like, it was basically like, but don't do that. Like, but if you do it,
Yeah.
it's just supposed to be this little side thing.
Yeah.
It's never should like compete with your husband's income.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like still a part that like I approach all the time trying to heal
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and like allow myself the abundance that I truly desire, because I do
Yeah.
believe that there's a world where I can make a lot of money and make meals for my family, help them do their homework, and be with them all the time that I want to be with them,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. And on top of that, like if you were in your like thriving in your biggest potential, and then your husband was able to like step into his fullest potential, doing something that he wanted to be doing and loved to be doing, rather than just relying on, I have to stay at this job because this job is paying and covering, protecting and providing
Yes.
for my family, right?
Yeah.
Like how much more fulfilling would it be for him to know that like you guys are in this as equal parts, and that he now can step into something he fully loves, and then what that dynamic does and shifts for your family. I think there's so much more to it than we really think of. Like you and I were just talking about, like our husbands both have this, I think, like sense of like, I am the provider, I'm the protector, like I'm taking care of you. And so they stay in jobs and stay in roles and stay in things with that full sense of duty, rather than like, are they living lives that they feel alivened with, like they feel like lit up about. And I think, not that it's our responsibility as women to do that, but like taking a look at like, how am I and what contributing part do I have in that, of like, how do I honor my husband and allow him to step into his fullest potential too. And sometimes that does, I think, come from the woman stepping into her full potential and like being in that fullest potential that really allows him to see that and to be in that too. I think that there's this, I think every relationship's different, but I see it a lot in our relationship. Like, I am the pusher, I am the go-getter, I am the like visionary. I think for a lot of women, we are the visionaries of our families. Like, it is oftentimes the woman who's like envisioning all of these possibilities and potentials. And I think sometimes it's our vision that's going to be able to allow our husbands to be able to step into that. So I think that's like a whole other conversation that is something that's really vital and important that we start talking about. The other thing that you mentioned that I wanted to kind of touch on was recently, and I think there's actually a book written about it. I haven't read the book, but I've seen people commenting and posting about it, is this idea of like, she called it like the new ageism, the focus on the self, and how that is so dismantling of like biblical constructs and things like that. And I think it's something I've wrestled with. Like you said, it's like you're taking this ball of yarn of like, this is everything that I've been taught and the ways of being and the ways I've raised and brought up. So like, I'm holding this, but I'm also seeing this over here and wondering like, how do they integrate? How do they make different? How do they, whatever, like, where do I stand in this? And this is one of those things, like, I know for many people I know that are still very much in that church structure, see a lot of the things that I do, or a lot of the things I say about like bringing things back to the self, like even in the sense of like healing. Like, I believe like our bodies have everything it needs to heal itself. We have so much power and so much potential to shift our trajectory. We have so much that does reside within the self. And I would say a lot of those people that are still in that church structure see that as, I don't want to see de-escalating like the role of God. They call it like the new ageism is like overemphasizing the self and the responsibility of the self, right? And you and I talked about in the beginning just this like autonomy and like bringing things back into this like self responsibility. So I think it kind of maybe ties back into that conversation too, of like what I heard you talking about in just like the last little bit you talked about too, is like this idea of like really owning who you are and like stepping into that and like the self discovery. So how do you see that, right? Like that, how has that wrestle, I think, been for you?
Yeah.
in rediscovering that, like the everything's outside of you versus it's all inside of you, which is kind of what you were just
Yeah.
alluding to.
Yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to comment on what you were saying. And like you said, it's like an entirely huge different conversation. But
Mm-hmm.
a writer that I really like reading from, and she's actually a an ex-Mormon as well, but Celeste Davis and other people too. But she's talked about how like all of these religions, like, and the Bible, like written by men for men about men, right? And so like the spiritual journey of men is this, and the spiritual work of men is different than the spiritual work of women. Like for men, it's so much about like what Jesus taught, right? Was like ego death, not, like being selfless, like looking outward, like taking care of others, right? Walking in their shoes, like healing, all of these things, right? Like that's the spiritual work of men. And like for women, like a lot of those things are things that a lot of us naturally already do. And so then when we take our spiritual advice from men and we're trying to ego death and like sacrifice, lose ourselves, for the kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
like we're already like our job is ego building. Like that's our spiritual work. And so that's why so many women are like crumbling under
Mm-hmm.
this like masculine spiritual work. Like it's not our work to do to kill our ego.
Interesting.
Like
Yeah.
so many women, like number two thing that I teach in like my programs and like when I'm talking to women is self-compassion, because so many women are just like riddled with inner critics, this language that they've heard and this criticism that they see all around them and this comparison of
Mm-hmm.
I need to be this good. I need to do all these things just like other women that I see, quote unquote, because I think that like we're making up stories in our head about what other people's lives really are like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And instead, we need to be like finding our own magic, like trusting in our own power and magic and all of those things. And so, I talked to you before about like how I don't know all the reasons why Wicked like resonates for everybody else, but for me, I see this person who was like, she knew from the beginning, like she was different, right? But like her dream was like to meet the wizard and to like access his magic and that she would finally be special if she could just make good and like be able to be with the wizard. But like the thing that was hidden all along was like her incredible power.
Yeah.
And she just thought like anytime she showed her power, it was like shameful. It was like something she had to hide and cover up and make an excuse for. And then she gets to the wizard and realizes he has no real power and no authority over her. And she has all the power inside of herself. And that like that last song where she's like, no wizard that is or was is ever going to bring me down.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my husband both like cry every time we watch it. It's just like, that's the moment. But before that, she's like, okay, I'm going to try it. I'm going to fly. And she gets the broom. So spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, what are you doing? But like she falls off the cliff, like in her attempt. And what she sees is like herself, her little girl, right? Like going back to this parts work, like seeing that little girl who probably hated herself, probably saw herself as this like deplorable outcast.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to like access her magic, she's reaching for her little self and then like catches the broom and soars
Yeah.
off. All of that to say,
Mm-hmm.
like, what has that experience been like for me? Like, I think it's like that, right? Like you get these little glimpses like throughout the movie where she kind of like, she's excited, she's like feeling powerful and she like lifts off the ground momentarily, like you start catching these little moments of like, oh my gosh, I'm so much more powerful than I was led to believe that I was.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I still have some of these limiting beliefs of like, oh, what if I've got it wrong? Like, what if the authority really is outside of me? But I've had to reach toward those little girl parts of me.
Yeah.
And like when we were on our retreat and we did that breath work, like, remember, like that's what came up. Like I saw this little 5-year-old version of me who had this like purple sleeveless dress and I was in church, but it like came with a little shawl, but I just love like my shoulders to be free.
Yeah.
I took off the shawl and then like was told that I needed to put it back on. Like I need to cover my shoulders. That has always stuck like deep in my subconscious. It's like this wounding moment, but it came up like during that breath work along with like lots of other moments. But, you know, the words I had to say out loud and yell were like, I'm so powerful. Like I
Yeah.
had to tell that girl, like, you are so powerful.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes it feels like you're falling off a cliff.
Mhm.
It feels terrifying and it's full of grief. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I took a leap and like I'm not immediately flying.
Mhm.
And then other times you're like, I'm so free. I'm so content knowing that like I don't know the whole future. I don't know everything that's going to happen in my life and like the exact right path. Like before I
Yeah.
had this like clear outlined path given to me. And like I no longer have that path and that
Yeah.
sucks in some ways.
Mhm.
But what that really means is that like the path is completely open to me. Like
Mhm.
I can boom, you know, fly as far and as high as I want.
Yeah. I think for me, like just what you said there is that I think for me, what I've recognized is like, I don't always know. I don't have all the answers. Like, and even my kids will be like, what do you think happens after we die or this and that? And I'm oftentimes like, I actually really don't know. Like, I don't know what it's like. I don't know what it is. But I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is that following those nudges, like you said, I think sometimes we do what I've recognized is like, I feel so much more content. I feel so much more loved. I feel so much more grounded. I feel so much happier. Like there's all of those things. I'm like, when I look back to the journey that I was on before that was so full of judgment or shame or ridicule or control or any of those types of things. And when I look at them, I'm like, I don't know. I could be totally off base and this may not be like the truth of the world or whatever, but it feels so much better. And I would rather live my life this way and not in the sense of like, I'm out partying and drinking and doing all these like sinful things, like kind of an idea. It's like, no, I am like trusting my heart and I feel so much more connected to God than I ever did before. So for me, it's been like kind of releasing and letting go of all of that and just trusting, like, do you believe? I know the years ago, like there was this idea of like an elephant and it was talking about like religion. If God was the elephant and we had all these different religions around the elephant describing like the tail and they'd say it's long, it's cylindrical, it's kind of hairy. And then somebody on the belly being like, but it's wide and it's round and it's smooth. And then like the foot, it's like, no, but it's got these weird shapes on it, like everybody describing something a little bit different of the elephant, but really it's like, it is still the elephant. And I sometimes look at that too when I look at like the different religions of the world and the different belief systems and the different things out there. I think that we as humans just don't have any concept of really what God is. And yet we try to put it in a box and like we try to label it and put it there. And so for me, it's just been that releasing and letting go of like, this is the box. I was only playing with the trunk before and now I'm playing with the toes and now I'm playing with the belly and I'm like just experimenting with different parts of God and like different ways of being with it. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, Kate, we could probably keep talking forever, but it's
Or
been almost an hour now. If people want to connect with you and find you on the internet and learn more about what you do, because we didn't even touch bases on the fact that like you help heal women's hormones. Oftentimes people will reach out to me. Even just yesterday, somebody reached out to me on TikTok and was like, I'm 45 and my periods are like so painful and this is what they are and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, it sounds like there's an imbalance. I'm not the person that helps heal the imbalances, but I have a client that does. Like I will always send my people that reach out to me for like hormonal support, like actually balancing things out. I always like send them your way. But so I know we didn't touch base on that at all, but if you are somebody that's listening that has issues with your periods or your hormones or any of that type of thing, like Kate is your person to go to. So where can they find you?
yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
The referrals. Thank you. Yeah, I love, when I reached out to you, I was like, I'm your dream client because like we get it. Like I can tell you get it and I get it. Like listening to like understanding the natural and normal shifts of our hormones and like
Mhm.
leaning into that and like having an enjoyable retreat week of a period, right? But like I know for not everyone, like not everyone's looking forward to their period because it's
Yeah.
going to be an unpleasant
Comfortable.
time. And I do agree that like a lot of PMS and like actual period pain and things like that are just due to like not living in alignment with our body.
Totally.
because we're really fighting against it. We're really trying to not slow down, you
Yeah.
know, when our body needs us to slow down. And so doing those things can be really beneficial. But when at other times, when even doing those things, or maybe you're like, I'm always slowed down, I'm so exhausted that like I barely functioning. So, you know, like that's not helping. Like it's unfortunately very common. I'm talking to women in my DMs every day about I'm having bad periods, or I'm missing my period entirely, or energy is another one that a
Yeah.
lot of women are dealing with burnout. And so I created a private podcast that is kind of like a mini course on understanding your hormones, understanding common mistakes that women are making when they're trying to naturally balance their hormones or balance them with like birth control. There's an episode all about just like busting myths on birth control. So I'm going to give you that link, Renee,
Yeah.
for people to
Totally.
sign up there. And then you know, it's a very like easy to get through series that's going to give you actually like a clue as to what's going on, where to start making things go right so that you can have more energy, more vitality, easier periods, you know, better fertility, whatever it is like that. And so I would love for you to check that out if you're interested. It's totally free, and you can find me at on Instagram. That's kind of my main and only platform that I am active on, at Queen Bee Hormone Health, because I love bees. Oh, so many reasons we could talk. I feel like bees are the hormones of Mother Earth. So there's that. But yeah, you can find me there. You can message me there if you want to learn about my programs. I do functional lab testing and trainings and live and group coaching. So lots of great things there.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, ooh, I want to know more. I want to like we should have a whole episode just about this kind of stuff too. And that's what I'm finding with these podcast episodes where we like just to get into conversation and talking is like I could keep talking. Like we should have 3 hour long episodes. No I'm
Oh,
kidding.
yes, I would love to come back.
they they
I'd
would
love
we
to
would
come
just
and actually, you know, we can talk more about, because I'm sure your audience is interested in that,
yeah.
right? Or they know somebody that needs that kind of help.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. We'll do it. We'll get one in there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
inviting me. It's been really awesome.
Yeah, thanks so
Enjoyable.
much for coming and just being open and vulnerable. Like I know the first episode that I shared about letting go of a lot of my beliefs religiously was one of the hardest episodes I ever recorded. It was a very much like I'm exposing parts of me that I'm so worried like what other people are going to believe because I for so long I was so entrenched in that Christian way of believing and living and community. So I was so worried not just from a personal stance but like a business and like brand perspective as well. And so I just want to honor that for you too, like sharing and being open about that. It's not something that comes easy. It's not something, there's a lot of work that you've done to be able to be willing to come on here and share with everybody else and help somebody else maybe in that wrestle and in that process and just learning and growing and things like that too. So
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much.